Hi there. Welcome to Streets and Eats, the podcast where we want to inspire you to take your next trip. We're going to tell you all about some fantastic destinations and the best food to eat while you're there. Now remember, this pesky pandemic is still hanging out there, so until the world opens up completely and you feel really safe to travel again, use this time to research and plan. That's what we're here for.
In this episode, we're taking you on a road trip.
It's episode 15 already. Wow.
Now, we're in the Pacific Northwest, and it is really coming down today. It's living up to its wet reputation.
So should we tell them how we came with this idea of road tripping? We were supposed to take a road trip this weekend, as a matter of fact. But because of this Pacific Northwest rain and the wimps that we maybe are sometimes, we decided let's stay in our cozy apartment and just record podcasts instead.
Well, it goes a little bit beyond the rain for our decision to cancel.
Well, it does. But really, that was the instigator.
If you don't want to do it in the rain, you're not going to do it at all. And that kind of has developed over the years. But yeah, we had so much to do that we decided to cancel that road trip. Of course, we've been on plenty of them recently.
Don't worry, we have a plethora of road trip info to share with you.
And if you haven't figured it out by now, we love a good road trip. I love to drive. And now I guess maybe some people don't really like driving.
I used to love to drive. I don't.
You love to drive with me.
To drive as much anymore. I love being in the car. And yes, I love being in the car with you.
Yeah. Well, that's how we kind of developed our relationship from the very beginning.
It was because we both lived in dormitories when we were single.
Right.
So we had to find a way to get together. And I had a car.
I didn't. So we would go just tooling around the German. We were lucky enough to be living in Germany at the time. And we'd just go tooling around the German countryside with no real purpose other than to be together in the car, talk and explore and find some new Gasthaus to try out for lunch.
Yeah.
Just have a good time. But that developed. And I think our first big road trip was as a family, as a couple, as family, was to France and Spain. And I think we've mentioned that before. We
have. Because until we had a baby, we were like single and free. We didn't want to be encumbered by the car to go on an overnight trip. We did do it, I think, but it wasn't our primary
We weren't really road tripping. We were just using the car to go places.
But once we had that baby and you've got a baby bag and you've got diapers and formula and, I mean, you just
travel by car became the way to go.
Yeah, it was so much nicer.
And we could do that.
And we could. So anyway, we've got, like we said, a lifetime of road trips that we've done in the United States and around the world. We've road tripped on every continent except Antarctica. Well, we've never even been to Antarctica, so it's on our list.
And unless we could rent like a snowcat or something, I think a road trip in Antarctica is out of there.
Well, Devin was in Antarctica. Our oldest daughter was in Antarctica for 4 months. And I guess they have trucks and snow
ice roads,
machines and what have you. So she actually snowmobiled all over the place. I mean, I guess that's an Antarctica road trip, right?
Right.
But we haven't done that. So we can't talk about that.
Every continent except Antarctica for sure.
Did we road trip in South America? Let's think about this. I don't want to misrepresent ourselves. You know what? I don't think we road tripped in South America.
Well, I included that in my list because I remember driving around. Well, certainly. Yes, we did.
Okay, we did.
We drove around Peru.
We did?
Didn't we?
I don't remember driving around Peru.
No, okay. Well.
Okay, he was obviously with somebody else on this trip.
Shh, we won't talk about that. No, but we did drive around from Santiago to Valparaiso.
That's true. That's true. Chile. We did drive in South America. He's right.
And that was a pretty good trip.
It's our go-to thing. So pretty much everywhere we've been, we've driven.
If we can, somewhat. We will. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we're talking about more of the planning and the practical tips about, when we drive and when we don't drive, because there's definitely some method to that madness.
What do you think is your favorite thing about road tripping?
I really think it's the exploration aspect of it. I'm not as excited about a road trip down a road that I've already been down.
Yeah.
But you get me to some virgin territory.
We say that all the time. This is Virgin Road. This is Virgin Road.
That's right.
Hashtag Virgin Road.
And you don't know what's coming around the next corner or over the next hill. Yeah, I love that.
You know what my favorite thing is, though? I love that when you're out on the road, it's just you and me, or you and me and the kids, or you and me and the grandkids, or you and me and our friends. But it's enclosure time. It's time when we have each other to ourselves, and there's not all this other stuff happening. I just love that. Yeah. I mean, I get in the car and I know we're going on a road trip, and I automatically get that feeling of, oh, it's just a comfort. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and I might add the spontaneity aspect of it. I guess that's part of the exploration, but it's gotten pretty hard to be spontaneous, even in a road trip. There's some ways to incorporate that into it.
We'll talk about that
but
more
even the
because
spontaneity takes some planning.
Yeah. I mean, it is harder to be spontaneous with this pandemic.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I think that's going to change it, as we talked about in an earlier podcast. I think it's going to change travel
permanently.
Period. So
yeah,
we'll see. Okay. So road trips.
So where to start planning?
When you're planning a road trip, what's the first thing that you do?
Well, you have to think about why you're road tripping. And there's a couple of reasons I think that drive
road trips.
Most road trips.
One is
number one, probably.
Yeah. Visiting family. We talk for us, it's our number one. Well, no, it's probably not our number one as far as how many times we've done something, but it is a major reason. If we have family anywhere along the route or close to the route so that it can be along the route, we will go visit them, because I don't think that we ever get to see family enough.
Right. We're also spread out. Both of our families are so spread out.
So visiting family is one. Like we have, we've done that all over the place, down in California lately, across the states. Of course, visiting family is here in the United States. So
we've even done it living overseas when we had family visiting other places that we could drive to.
True.
So we drove from the Netherlands to Vienna to see my father and stepmother and sister.
That's exactly right.
It was a good road trip. It was a bit long. We didn't give enough time for it. So that's part of your planning too. And that kind of goes along with your visiting family. How much time do you need to be with family, and how much time do you have available for the road?
And things to do along the road.
And the things that you want to do along the way. Because you want to have that idea before you start planning. You can't hit the road with the intention of being to your family's house in 2 days, driving both days nonstop, and then see something along the way that you really want to do, because you're not going to be able to do it, or you're going to change the date that you're arriving. So you got to be careful about that.
And then there's other events that you might go to. It might be a wedding, a conference, a baseball game in another state. I mean, there's so many reasons that people just get in the car and go places, and you can turn it into a really cool road trip. Really cool road trip. And one of our favorites, we were going to a conference in Sweden, a travel conference, and
in Oslo.
Sweden. Oslo is not in Sweden.
Okay,
ignore his geography.
In Copenhagen.
Nope.
In Helsinki.
Nope.
We've been to everywhere.
Oh my gosh. All right. So we were on our way to Stockholm, Sweden for our conference. I know you were joking. And along the way, we really took our time once we got across the ferry and on Swedish ground. We really took our time and stopped at the castles. We went along the route. We even went to the IKEA museum, which was so cool. They had gourmet meatballs, as opposed to the plain old Swedish meatballs they have in your IKEA. Oh, by the way, IKEA is the European way of saying it. Here, I guess people say IKEA.
We say it wrong in the States.
Yeah, we do.
But that's how they say it too in the States.
But that was one of the most fun ones. We've done it for lots of different reasons. But whatever the event, whether the event's 2 hours or an afternoon or a week-long conference like we were going to, you can still usually add a few days on either end and have some fun going one way or the other.
Yeah. And on that one, we did it like a long route around the ferry across from Germany. And then we drove all the way back across the bridges. So that was kind of cool. But in that case, when you're planning, the event is going to give you a date that you need to plan around. So obviously you need to be where you're going on that date, plan for the amount of time you need before and after for the drive, and be generous.
So family conferences, one of the reasons we've done a lot of road tripping is we're always moving. And we've done a lot of those. We've done them cross country. We were coming back from Germany and we had our car delivered to Charleston, South Carolina. So we picked it up in Charleston and we drove all the way to Alaska. That was an epic road trip.
And we didn't just drive straight to Alaska.
Oh, heck no. We were all over the place.
We had a good, I think we took
6 weeks, I think.
6 weeks for that trip, which was awesome. And we just kind of went all over the U.S. to, places we wanted to go. We were heading west the whole time. So we never intentionally headed east to go back to something. But we went north and south and west and north and south and west and just kept going. And eventually, took the ferry up to Skagway.
No, we took the ferry to Haines.
The Haines, that's right. That's right. We've had the ferry to Skagway too.
Yeah, we've done that too. That's another podcast.
And then on to our new home in Anchorage,
which was amazing.
So that's a good reason. And we could have flown there, or we could have just driven straight there and 8 hours a day driving, spend the night somewhere, or transfer drivers and just keep going.
Yeah, the one thing
that's not the road trips we're talking about.
The one thing we didn't have on this particular trip, because the military was moving us, was we didn't have to rent a truck and move our stuff with us. We have done that as well. It doesn't make it quite as fun because you're worried about the rental. You've got all this extra crap with you. And it just, to me, it doesn't make it quite it.
You don't have as much time for sure.
Yeah.
But like with U-Haul, and this is not an advertisement for U-Haul, it's just the ones we end up using quite a bit. Usually you're renting the truck for a full week. You can't rent it for days, for 2 days. So if that's the case and it's only a 3-day drive, you've got a whole week to get there. Take your time, find something to do along the way.
Plus, it's just easier on your psyche. It's less stress.
So moving is almost always a one-way trip. We also did it just to move Devon's car.
Devon's car?
Yeah. She was getting a car from her husband's family on the East Coast, and they had moved to LA. And so we picked up,
we still ended up renting a car.
We still ended up renting a car because the car being given fell through.
Yeah.
And the trip was already planned.
Yeah, but we did. The moral of the story here is you can find a lot of things that you need to do and attach a road trip to it, I think.
Yeah.
You can do some touristy stuff, do some getting out in nature stuff. Just really.
There's so much to do everywhere. Whatever you're interested in, you're going to find it along a road somewhere.
The United States is amazing for road tripping. And we've road tripped all through Canada as well. Mm-hmm. All through Canada. We've been to, I think, all but 3
of the provinces.
Maybe. And those are kind of hard to get to.
I've never
the
really
ones we
counted
haven't been to. I think all but 3. Last time I tried to figure it out. And Canada is awesome to road trip through. We have not road trip through Mexico.
Right.
So we can't talk about that too much.
So, okay. So those are good reasons for a road trip. And they have their own timelines involved. You've got to be somewhere at a certain time.
But like when you're planning for anything, you have to worry about time. You got to worry about time. You got to worry about distance.
But you don't really have much spontaneity choices. You've got a destination. You've got to be there. You're heading for family. You're heading into an event, or you're moving from one place to another. But probably more road tripping we've done is just as a tourist, just to go out and explore. Like I said, that's what we love to do.
Yeah.
In that case, are you doing it from home? Are you flying to another place and leaving from there? You really have to consider how much time you want for the whole trip. If you're going to spend multiple days at one destination, and how much you are going to drive, all that has to come into it.
So one of the things that we do is we have a challenge called 50 States, 50 Weekends. And part of that is flying into a destination of someplace you wouldn't think of going to begin with. Because if you think about it, well, there's 50 states out there and you're just not necessarily, quote unquote, interested in all of them. For example, I'm just going to put this out there in North Dakota. Don't take this wrong. But, there's not a whole lot going on in people's minds about North Dakota. So one of the road trips I took was a trip straight into Bismarck, North Dakota. I flew in and I was with a friend. So we had a van and we took the van around all these significant places in North Dakota. And it was awesome. It was amazing because you know what? The United States is beautiful and it's amazing and there's tons to do and there was great food all over the place. And so that's what 50 States, 50 Weekends is. Just pick someplace and go. And one of the ways you can do that to see more of the place is to rent a car and do a little road trip once you're there. There are other ways to do it too, but it's definitely a viable way to have some fun and check off another state.
We've probably done, I would say, at least half of our road trips have been
fly and drive. Mm-hmm.
And in those cases, in your planning process, your flight dates are going to set the schedule. So you really want a good idea of how much time you need for the driving and the trip after you've landed. Because you can't add that time in most cases.
And you also got to think about, okay, now this is world travel more so than it is U.S. travel, but you've got to think about where you are in the world and where you're getting your rental car from. Sure. And the feeling you get when you pick that rental car up. Because we've like, I'm going to say Bulgaria. We flew into Sofia, Bulgaria, and we got this great deal on a rental car, but it wasn't from one of the huge companies. And we get the car and it was by no means one of those rental cars that's, brand new that changes every couple of years. I mean, this is Eastern Europe. And thankfully, we didn't have any trouble with the car on the entire trip. But we did save a full day, which we ended up using for other reasons, by the way, at the end of the trip to make sure that we got back to the airport on time.
Right.
In that particular case, Mother Nature intervened, and that was the time that the volcano in Iceland blew up. And all the flights were canceled, except for our flight and a flight to Egypt because we were going to Turkey. So we were going the opposite way
away from the volcano.
Ash.
So that worked out for us.
It still slowed everything down and interrupted travel. And we needed that extra day. So it was good that we worked
and
it
into our itinerary. And that's a good point about the rental cars.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's cheaper to not pick it up at the airport. So you have to have that time planned in.
Well, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but if I haven't, you'll still certainly hear it again because we've got a few sort of things that we do that we never change. So one of the things that's important to us, of course, is going to the capital city for a couple of reasons of any world trip, mainly because that's where the airport's going to fly into probably, unless it's a huge country where there's multiple international airports. The first place it's going to go is to the capital city. So you fly into the capital city, and then we always take a day to sort of acclimate and maybe see a little bit of the city, but then we get right out of the city so that we can have a day or two at the end to see the city and to have that, again, that buffer. And we pretty much do that every single time because we've just learned that travel always works out. We've never missed a flight and we've never really had problems that have prevented us from doing what we want to do. But at the same token, you just don't know what's going to crop up or what's going to happen. So that's what, and plus that way you can, I don't know. It's just the way we like to do it. And
makes it a little bit
work.
more comfortable. Okay. So types of road trips. I like to say we've got 4 or 5 basic road trips.
And what he means by types is how you drive.
The direction you're traveling, the route you're taking, I guess.
Who's driving?
So the first one I call the Great Circle Route. And that's probably our favorite. Because we like being on new road, right?
It's our preferred way to do it. A circle route means that you're not double tracking hardly ever. I mean, there might be to your hotel or something, but overall, you're going to a new place every day or every couple days, and you're staying in a hotel, and then you're moving on to the next point, and then you just end up at the place that you started, but not by going on the same roads, so that you've seen something different each time. And we've done this
all over the place.
All over.
Probably my favorite was our Iceland road trip. And that's kind of where I got the name, because on Iceland, you do the Great Circle Route.
It's not called Great, the Golden Circle, I think it's called.
Yeah.
But we've always called it the Circle Route. I don't know. The Great I just like added.
It. And you're on an island. So, of course, you're driving around the island. So that's really obvious. But, I mean, it doesn't have to be an island. Anytime that you start in one place and head out on the road and spend the night here, go off to the next place, spend the night there, go off to the next place, spend the night there. And eventually you end up back where you started from. We've done that, yeah, like you said, everywhere. Even the Iowa reunion, which we could have just driven interstate to Iowa and interstate back. We turned that into
a circle route
because we really prefer that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And then the next one, which is also a very good idea for different reasons. And we call it the classic star. And what that means is that you have a central point where you're staying for, let's say, a week. And then you take day trips out from there and then come back to the same place each night. Now, what's good about this is, especially if you have kids, you're not packing up the car and changing every single day. Or maybe you've got a timeshare, and that's a good way to,
or an
Airbnb or something that is a really great place to stay. But there's a lot of stuff within, day tripping distance that you can see.
That works really good if you're doing like a regional thing or a smaller country or a smaller state. Like, for instance, in Kosovo, we stayed in Pristina, and we were only there for 3 days, I think. And we just took day trips out from Pristina. Like, we went out to Prizren and Peš and Gračanica.
Yeah, we don't know how to pronounce any of those, by the way.
Right. Okay.
Also, we planned one for a friend of ours when their very first family road trip. They were going to Bavaria. And of course, we're very familiar with Bavaria. We've lived in Germany for so many years.
Right. And they wanted to do all those classic Bavaria things.
But they had 3 kids, all under the age of 7. So, of course, we thought, well, the best thing to do is a classic star, because they need to just sort of be able to drop their stuff, take what they need for the day, and come back. And so they did that, and they had a wonderful time. So I think it works especially well with kids, but you don't have to have kids to really make it work either. It just depends on what you like to do.
Right. So then there's the one way, and that's kind of like what we were talking about before with the moving, where you're starting from point A and heading to point B. But it doesn't have to be moving. You can fly to point B or point A.
You fly into point A,
get a one-way rental, and drive to point B.
We've done that.
Or the opposite, drive a one-way rental to one location and then fly back or train back or bus back, whatever.
In fact, let me tell this story. I just love this. So I'm not the best with cell phones. They're just kind of a pain, and then you always have to hold them. So we were flying from Germany into, where did we fly into? Atlanta. We flew into Atlanta.
And that was our I-40 road trip.
And I don't know why I had my cell phone out. I never have it out on
I think you wanted to take a picture out the window.
I did. That was my point. But I don't normally even have it with me. Anyway, so I take this picture out the window. And of course,
I think you made me dig it out of the backpack.
Anyway, at any rate, I took this stupid picture out the window and promptly put my phone in the pocket of the plane and forgot about it.
As we were landing, right?
6 hours, 7 hours later, we're landed in Atlanta. We're tired as can be, and we have to get to the rental agency. Or I guess we spent a night at the hotel first. But anyway, we got things to do. So, and you know how it is. You're so ready to get off that plane that you just, Well, I left the phone on the plane. And were we coming back to Atlanta?
No.
No.
One-way trip.
This was a one-way trip from Atlanta to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And then we
it was
flew out
all
of Los
planned out,
Angeles back to Germany. And we were road tripping in between. So I go to the Lost and Found. Everything's shut down on the plane. They can't find my phone. And they're like, but give us the information. We'll send it to you.
The cleaning crew was gone until the next day.
I'm like, you're not going to send it to me. So anyway, we tell them, go ahead and send it. We're flying out of LA. Here's our flight information. Please have it waiting for us when we get there. And they did.
Long story short.
And lots of trying to cajole people at LA that this actually did happen. And convince them that yes, the people in Atlanta sent the phone. They have sent us. They sent us confirmation that it was there. But anyway, it took a while to get it, but we did get it. So here it was. What was it, like 10 days later?
Yeah.
And 3,000 miles from the beginning point. And not only did we have a great road trip, but we got our phone back. It was pretty awesome.
So on that one way, it was a fly in, drive, and fly out.
Yeah. That was the whole purpose of the trip. It was great.
Okay, so the next type is the there and back again. So if you're keeping
Which
track,
I think is probably what most people do a lot.
Yeah, you're going to start from one. Well,
you're going to start from home a lot and
go
somewhere.
A there and back again. A circle route is a there and back again, right? But that's not really what I'm talking about. Here, the there and back again is where you're kind of have to take the same road, or you do take the same road to a destination and then come back. And it's usually, for us anyway, the only time we're going to do that is
if we can't avoid it.
The situation dictates it, and we can't avoid it. For instance, we did the road trip from Anchorage to Dead Horse, which is up in the very north as far as you can drive.
And there's one road.
In Alaska. And there's only one road, so you're going to go up and back.
And road is a generous term.
Right.
Gravel path.
Right. Well, it's not a path because it's for the trucks.
It is. It's a road. It's the haul definitely road a road. It's called the haul road, but it is. Ooh, it is rough.
But it's stunning.
And it's beautiful. Yeah. I mean, if you want, I'm not saying
untouched landscapes.
It was amazing.
Yeah, through Alaska, through the heart of Alaska. And in that case, you've got to have everything planned along the way and what you're going to do on the way back. My recommendation for there and back again is to do everything you really want to do on the way there. Because oftentimes what I find for us is on the way back, after it's been a while, we just kind of want to get back.
Well, but I also think it depends on what you're doing, what you want to do. Because if something spontaneously pops up, like a festival or something that you didn't know about, and you want to go to the festival, it may not be there when you're coming back.
Yeah.
So take it and then just remember that you needed to still do whatever it was that you wanted to do.
But there's been plenty of times on road trips where we're in the last 2 or 3 days after like a 4-week trip.
You're kind of road weary.
Home is in sight, and usually we try to limit our driving to about 400 miles a day or 500 kilometers a day.
It depends on what we're doing. It just depends on what we're doing. But yeah, nowadays especially.
So if we're like within 500 miles of home, that's actually pretty doable. We usually want to kick
it and get there.
Yeah. So that's what I say. Try and get all those things that you really want to do on the way out, because you may want to cut your time on the way back.
Anyway.
Okay, so then there is, of
course, you could do any combo,
the combination
of
which
any
is
of the above.
In reality, what most of our road trips are. There's some combination of all these other 4 types, and we've done some pretty big ones. I think the last one we did was northern Italy. On our way out of Germany, we were moving to Japan, but we really wanted to do a couple more things, and we hadn't spent as much time as we wanted to in Italy. So we drove into northern Italy through
more than northern Italy. We went down all the way to Emilia-Romagna.
That's true.
It's south from there, I think. But anyway, we did a lot.
And so we did a there and back again, kind of on the way out of Germany through the Brenner Pass and down into northern Italy.
Because we wanted to get there as soon as we could.
Right. And we wanted to get home as soon as we could, because that stretch of the road, which is like a 2-day trip, we've done many times, and we've done it as a road trip like to Bolzano, where we spent a few more days on the road. So that was there and back again to that point. But from somewhere around, I guess around Bolzano, actually, it turned into a great circle route.
Yeah.
Through the top half of Italy, I should say, not just northern Italy. And we spent several days at each location where we would do day trips out in a star pattern. And that was an amazing trip.
I can't think of too many trips we've had that aren't amazing.
Right.
That's because we love to travel. So how could it be? All right. So as Jim prefaced with way at the beginning, he loves to drive, and he is not, I mean, he's fearless. He doesn't mind getting into these countries and driving.
Most countries.
I mean, places that you would be surprised. Well, first of all, we lived in Turkey for 4 years, and I think Turkey is maybe one of the more challenging places to drive.
It can be.
And I think Italy too.
I think South Korea is
probably
pretty
the
hard
most
challenging place that we've driven in.
But, you know, I mean, it's challenging because you're not used to the driving personality of the collective driving personality of the country. For instance, in Italy, people always talk about Italian drivers, but they're just aggressive.
They are very aggressive.
They're
very offensive drivers, not offensive.
Not yeah, they don't offend you. And they're actually very polite, and they're very,
that's true anyway.
I mean, they're usually especially if they see that you're a tourist, they're very helping and welcoming and stuff.
Sure.
But
that's true
at
everywhere.
the same time, yeah, it's true everywhere.
On a road trip, especially.
But if they are, I mean, if they're not going to wait for you, you know, they're going to take the light if that's what they need to do.
If they
and that's the same.
Nose ahead of you, they're going to nose ahead of you.
And that's true in so many countries. So if you're like me, I'm much wimpier about those things. I probably wouldn't get anywhere. That's why Jim has to do the driving. But you have choices. In almost everywhere that we've driven, you also have the choice to rent a car with a driver, especially in those countries that are probably
more challenging,
have reputations of being more challenging.
And in some cases, the rental is about the same price.
Yeah. So here's a good example. We have some really good friends who were going to Uganda the same time that we went to Uganda. And we picked two different car rental places. They picked one with a chauffeur, and we picked one that was a self-drive. They thought we were crazy, and you know, we did run into a few times when we may have gotten lost, but that's okay. We were fine.
I don't know that we ever got lost. The routes just took longer than we expected.
This is for sure. Well, anyway, so we met them on the end of their trip, more at the beginning of our trip, where
last stop for them, first stop for us.
We intersected and we kind of compared notes on the driving, and they were happy as can be. And they didn't end up, they spent more than we did. It costs more to have a chauffeur. There's no doubt about that. And you're in the car with this person for a long time. Like I said, that's sort of like captured time. You're not going to be able to get away from them. And we've had a few drivers that could be sort of challenging to deal with. But overall, I mean, they're locals. They know the place. They know where to stop for gas. They may or may
not speak English. So don't think of a driver in a rental car as a guide.
No, exactly.
Because more often than not, they're not.
And you can hire a guide too, but that's of course a different price. Right. So that's a whole different thing. So, but you can either self-drive or you can hire a chauffeur. There was two places we were denied getting a car. And we were denied because supposedly, I mean, who knows if it's 100% true, supposedly they don't feel that foreigners can handle either the roads or the situation. And after having done these two countries, I might agree with them. The first was Madagascar.
Yeah.
And the roads there
they're pretty bad.
Pretty atrocious.
But, you know, the trip that we took, and the reason well, first of all, we decided to get a driver because we were definitely having trouble finding a rental agency that would just rent us a car without a driver. They said they wouldn't. And when you look at the road conditions and you look at some of the videos on YouTube, yeah, it can be a very scary place to drive, especially in the north or in the more remote areas. You really need to be an experienced off-road driver. And when we talk off-road, we're talking no road, or probably you'd be better off if they didn't try to have a road.
I think it's more of a path.
So that Madagascar one, but looking back on the trip that we took and the places that we went,
We could have done it.
we definitely could have driven.
We
that.
could have.
It was not any
But-
worse than other places.
But in all fairness, we have a lot more experience doing this than
True.
most people.
And it really was presented to us as not an
even
option.
feasible. That's right. The other place that we were told, no, you can't. I agree with them 100%. You can't unless things have changed. We went to Mongolia,
Right.
and what is it? 80 kilometers outside of Ulaanbaatar.
You lose the roads.
There's no more roads. The road ends.
So you're driving
the
by-
pavement ends,
You're
and
driving
there
across
are.
grasslands by direction.
Well, they have two. They have a path. The kind of path where you
Yeah, in
have
some
the.
places the wheels have made a driving path.
Not everywhere, like
But
Jim
not
said,
everywhere.
only in some places. In fact, I know we would have gotten lost, and we don't speak Mongolian, so we would have been totally, up a creek. But even our driver got lost one time, and he was very good about it. He wasn't worried about it, and I'm sure he was just gonna. I mean, he knew where in the general vicinity he was supposed to be,
Right.
and he kept going sort of what he thought was the right way. But believe me, as soon as he got to someone he could ask, he definitely asked. So.
Right.
And we couldn't have done that. I mean, there's just not enough
And you
people
need
that
a
speak English
specialized
there.
vehicle, and
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and the vehicles
it's not
broke
an
down
option.
pretty much every night.
I guess you could rent a car or something if you're going to stay in Ulaanbaatar, but for the most part, no.
Saying that, however, and those are not the only places we've had chauffeurs, but saying that, if you guys have not done Madagascar or Mongolia, I think those are
Highly recommended.
two of our most amazing trips we've ever taken. And we'll definitely be talking more about them in later podcasts. But just know if you want to do it that way, your other choice is to take buses and stuff.
Yeah.
Although Mongolia, I don't
Where
know,
else?
you
We
probably
also
have to
had a-
hire someone to take you on a motorcycle or a
Right.
horse.
Which you can do. And some very adventurous people do drive across on motorcycles. But
Yeah. Well,
that's
with
not
film
us.
crews. No.
And with film crews and production teams. Yeah. Well, we've also had a driver in India and Sri Lanka. And both of those places, I would not recommend self-driving unless you're really familiar with it.
Yeah. Sri Lanka, I think you probably could.
Wasn't too
the
bad.
only problem with Sri Lanka is that they're always on the brink of war with the
Somewhere,
Tamils.
yeah.
So that's what makes that kind of scary. So there's these different kinds of road trips. There's these different reasons for going on road trips. And now we have to talk about how we're going to deal with those. And again, timing is always the biggest killer. That's just
Right.
what you can
You've got to
afford to
know
do.
how much time you're going to have before you go.
But I was thinking that maybe we should talk about some apps or some maps or
Sure.
the ways.
Some more practical information just to help plan
Yeah.
and be ready, I guess.
My favorite, of course, I'm a Google Map guru. I just I'm addicted to Google Maps. I don't think there's a day that goes by that I'm not on Google Maps.
We make Google Maps for everything.
We do. We make them. We're always figuring out timing between places. And of course, sometimes you can rely on it and sometimes you can't. That's why you leave your buffer.
Yeah.
And the good thing about a Google Map is as long as you've downloaded it while you still have Wi-Fi, once you are driving, it'll retain the map. Just
Right.
don't turn it off.
Even if you haven't downloaded it, if you start your directions from your point that you're leaving from and the point you're going to before you leave the data area, it'll hold your directions for you. Now, if you leave those directions, you may have difficulty,
Yeah.
but you
good luck.
have it in there. And once you rejoin the directions, then it'll rejoin you onto the map. But yeah, the best way is to download a Google map. And we've got the directions for how to do that on our website while you're in a Wi-Fi area. The other thing we found is it's really easy and cheap to get a SIM in a lot of countries. So if you're internationally traveling, if you've got an unlocked phone, like in Europe, you can get a €7 SIM that includes data that will keep you connected to data the whole time you're there.
And all through Africa, it's super
Through
cheap to get
Africa.
Sims
It's a little more challenging just because of
for
language.
connectivity a little bit. But no, I mean, you can still do
But
it.
very affordable and didn't take up a lot of our time. So that's a good option. There's other maps that we like to use. for offline, if we know we're going to be offline for most of the time, I'll use maps.me, where you can also download like a whole region or a whole country. That one's a really good one.
You know what's harder to get nowadays, though? Are paper maps.
Paper maps.
I still love a good paper map.
Yeah, even though we talk about these apps, you definitely want to have a paper map.
If you can find yourself a paper map, I say buy one, no matter where you are. We were just in Austria, I'd say this is a couple of years ago, and we crossed the border. We were going into Switzerland for a festival, but we also had planned on doing an Austrian road trip a little bit later. So we pull into this Austrian gas station on the way to our festival, and there's no maps. And we asked the guy, where can you buy maps? He's like, no, they don't exist anymore.
Right.
Now, I don't know how true that is.
That happened in Spain too.
But let me tell you, maps are harder and harder to find nowadays. So
pick them up, order them before you go. Get on Amazon. I really like the Marco Polo maps. They do a really good job of showing the sites, all kinds of different sites on the map, and also showing scenic routes on the map.
Which is, of course, what you want to take if you can.
Yeah. So as a minimum on your map, I would say look for ones that include scenic routes.
All right. So now we have a few rules of the road that we like to talk about. One of the things you need to do is sort of look up how to drive in that country before you get there. For example, we were in Portugal, and you always have to worry about where you're going to park and how much parking is, or where you can't park, right? And also for tolls if you're going on roads. And the way Portugal does their tolls is a little bit different, but it's explained all over the place, and we were ready for it. So we knew what we were doing.
And it can change at a moment's notice.
That's the problem. Yeah. So
you definitely want to keep up on the driving conditions as far as tolls and parking go. But then you also want to be familiar with international road signs and the speed limits for where you're going. Do they drive on the left or the right? We're talking about the car or the road, left or right. I don't know. It always confuses me. And my recommendation to people, if you're going to go somewhere where they drive on the opposite side of the road of what you're used to, is to make sure you're driving a vehicle that was made for those road conditions. So we would drive from Germany into England, and it was always a challenge for the first day or two, but you get used to it. But if you fly in and get a rental car,
it's just more natural.
You're just driving, and it's very natural. It's not a thing to worry about at all.
The only time I ever had a problem changing sides of the road was when you're on some back road somewhere, which we always are, and we pull out of something, and then
you don't have lines on the road.
There's no traffic. There's no lines. There's no point of reference. So that always messes you up. That can
get you for a little bit. And also, my worst time is actually when I get back from one of those trips, readjusting. It's harder for me to readjust.
It's kind of weird
coming back than it is for me to adjust to when I'm there.
But just sort of go over before you go, try and look up and research a few of the major things that you need to know.
Yeah, and this is pretty easy information to find. Actually, a good place to start is the State Department, state.gov. They have a really good travel information that includes driving conditions. Wikipedia, of course, or WikiTravel is really good also.
I think we're going to stop right there. We're going to call this part one of this
we can come back.
And I think we'll take you up on some more road tripping information and
let's leave them with the 10 simple rules, because those are important for any road trip. Number 1, don't drink and drive ever. In some countries, it's illegal to have any alcohol in your system. But no matter what, whether you're even staying in the States, driving in the States, if you're in a new and unknown area, it's just going to make it that much harder for yourself. So don't do it.
This is a big one for me. Don't drive at night. I don't even like really driving at night in the United States anymore. But when you are in a foreign country, especially, people wear black more than we do here in the States.
You don't have the lighting that you expect.
Yeah, there's not as good a lighting as you would expect. There's animals oftentimes in the street.
Pedestrians.
Yeah, it's just
bikes.
It's a little bit scary. It's a little bit scary. I really suggest that you do a driving trip where you are back at your hotel
or at the next location before dark.
Or the next hotel before dark. Plus, you're just more comfortable. Believe me, it's not worth the stress.
All right. So number 3, drive slightly slower than the traffic. It's okay. And you'll get a sense of the traffic speed as you're driving. It's okay. People will pass you. They won't have trouble with that. But don't go so slow that you're impeding the flow of traffic and you're forcing people to pass you that wouldn't otherwise be passing you.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned number 4, know the rules of the road, like the speed limits, the right of ways.
And I already mentioned hazards too. The hazards are there during the daytime, obstacles, ditches. Oh, one time we were in Taiwan and there was a boulder that was
right
in the middle of the road. And there was this little tiny truck that was half the size of the boulder, trying to move it. So you're always going to be running into things, but at least when it's daytime, you can see the hazards and just be ready to stop it on a dime, basically.
And just, know what those common ones are. Number 6, common sense and courtesy goes a long way. Leave your aggression. If you're prone to road rage, maybe you don't want a road trip.
Maybe you're not the person for a road trip
but
overseas.
Leave all that at home. You're the visitor. So at some point,
you're going to make mistakes as a visitor.
You're going to make mistakes.
So
you don't know where you're going.
Say, put your hands up in that, like, I'm sorry, look,
smile,
and just smile at people. They'll forgive you. But coming across like, what's the problem? Why are you mad at me? I'm a visitor. That's not going to work.
That's not going to work. It's going to make matters worse.
And you're going to be stressed out.
So number 7, don't be scared. It's going to happen. You're going to at some point hit a roadblock or get stopped by an official.
Well, if you travel in the countries we travel in, there are always roadblocks and there are always people checking. Yeah, it's a way of life. They're always checking passports. And they're like, we were in Jordan, for example. I think we hit more roadblocks in Jordan than maybe any other country. But this is what happened. They pull you over, you hand them your documents, and they look at you and they look at your paperwork and they might ask you a question. And in Jordan, they always say, welcome to Jordan, with this huge smile on their face. And you're done.
They hand it back and off you go.
You've done nothing wrong. Just be ready for that.
So don't be scared. Yeah. Be polite, be friendly, be helpful. Make sure you know what documentation you need before. A good way to do that if you're renting a car is to ask at the rental agency, what will I need if I have a traffic stop? And they'll tell you. And then just make sure you have it ready. Number 8, only park your vehicle in legal, well-lit parking areas and know how to pay for the parking. And make sure you pay the proper amount.
Yeah. It's always a challenge. Even in the States, it's a challenge, I think. But overseas, it can be even more of a challenge.
And that's another thing you can ask when you're getting a rental car. Ask about parking. Ask about tolls. Ask about parking. And ask about documentation. Those are the 3 things you have to ask every time.
Yeah.
You can also ask for a map, but you may or may not get one. And
most places are really, really safe. And you're not going to have thieves targeting you in a car, typically. Especially if you've gotten the car from a rental agency, because they don't necessarily think you're a foreign tourist. They might just think you're a local tourist. However, it's never a good idea inside or outside the car to sort of flash your stuff and let people know that you have a lot of stuff with you, or you have camera gear, or you have cell phones. It's just sort of a good idea to keep everything as out of sight as possible. We like getting cars with hatchbacks so that you can put all your stuff in the hatchback. Or trunks.
Something that covers the back at least, for sure.
Now, this is not even going to help you 100% of the time, but it'll certainly help you most times. So don't worry about traveling around the world. We've done it. We've never had anything stolen.
Yeah.
We've had one car broken into, but they didn't steal anything.
That's right. In Poland.
Yeah, we were in Poland at the time. This was a few years,
and we
quite
were
a few years
not
ago.
Following that rule.
And yeah, we had stuff all over the car.
We have things visible in the car. So don't tempt people. And that's number 9 and 10. Don't leave anything visible and don't leave anything of value. And that's it. Those are the 10 rules for the road. Those are our tips on road tripping and some ideas of some good road trips you can take.
I think that's still only a part 1. We have a lot more that we can talk about. So look forward to part 2, which will be next week.
Yeah.
And we'll give you some more ideas of road trips to do. Maybe how to prepare your house when you're leaving on a road trip. Some things to make sure you have with you when you're road tripping. There's so much to it. And it's probably our favorite thing in the world to do. So We love sharing it with you.
So we'll probably take one road trip, for example, and use that as how we planned it and what we did. And yeah, the fun you can have on a road trip.
And meantime, jump on our private Facebook group, Streets and Eats, and tell us about your road trips, and tell us about or ask us questions that you might want answered about future road trips.
Share tips that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, we love that.
All right. Thanks for joining us at Streets and Eats. Thank you for listening. We really want to encourage you to savor your adventures. Please remember, if you can, hit the subscribe button. Tell all your friends. Share us.
We really appreciate it.
And until next time.
Ciao for now.